People share the creepiest unsolved mysteries that still scare them to this day. Number 1. A creepy one off the top of my head is the harassment of Bill and Dorothy Wacker, an elderly couple from Ohio. Their house had been ransacked a couple of times between 1984 and 1985. Then, in July of 1985, a stranger knocked on their door whilst Dorothy was home alone, recovering from heart surgery, asking to use their phone due to his car apparently breaking down. She thought he'd left after making the call, but then was knocked unconscious by a blow to the head. Dorothy woke up bound and gagged on the kitchen floor, but thankfully managed to crawl to an open window to get help from her neighbors, who called the police. Bill then returned home to find his revolver, among a few other things, had been stolen. This was accompanied by the message, "Cheaper, but will do," scrawled in crayon on one of their walls. 4 months later, the revolver turned up on their porch in a bag. The harasser repeatedly phoned the couple, sometimes threatening them and sometimes just breathing deeply down the phone like a fucking creep. Despite changing their phone number multiple times, they were unable to stop the calls. After this, they installed security lights. The harasser responded with a note saying, "Your lights are a laugh." They were frequently left other mocking and scary notes. Dorothy was then attacked once more in 1993, a full 8 fucking years after the original attack, this time being sent to the hospital with skull lacerations. The Wackers staked out their own house after this in an attempt to find the person who had been harassing them. However, they didn't find anything. After the stakeout had been called off, they heard banging at the side of their house and found a note simply saying, "Get the message." After this, as far as I can recall, the harassment abruptly stopped. It really freaks me out. What motive would one have to harass a random old couple? For years and years, they never got close to finding out who did it, and both Bill and Dorothy died without ever finding out who made their lives hell. Number 2. My favorite is probably John Lang's case. Basically, a local activist posts regularly about the Fresno Police Department and about how they were plotting against him. People thought he was crazy until he set up a camera that recorded lots of weird shit, including a bunch of cops parking across the street from his house, staring at him in the middle of the night, and a van pulling up with a large camera that people theorized took thermal pictures through walls to see if anyone was inside. He posted that weekend the police was going to murder him and accurately predicted his death. The police released a report saying that he was stabbed repeatedly in the back, and then recanted, saying it was supposedly a suicide of a crazy man. Number 3. Disappearance of the Sauter children. Christmas Eve, 1945. The Sauter family home in Fayetteville, West Virginia burned to the ground. There's the father, George, the mother, Jenny, and 9 children. 4 of the children escaped, but 5 were believed to have died in the fire. Then, during the search of the burned house, none of the children's remains were found. The fire was nowhere near hot enough to burn through bone, but not a trace of them were found. Here's the freaky shit. 2 months ago, a visiting salesman told George his house would go up in smoke, and your children are going to be destroyed. The salesman attributed this to George's dirty remarks against Mussolini. George, an Italian immigrant, had been outspoken against Mussolini, which angered some in his Italian-American community. Another visitor later told George that his fuse boxes would cause a fire someday. This was after George just had his electricity rewired and inspected to be safe. In the weeks before Christmas, the older Sauter children noticed a car following them through the main town as they walked home from school. During the night of the fire, Jenny was awoken by a strange phone call after midnight, asking for a name she did not know. At 10 a.m., Jenny heard a loud banging on the house's roof, but went back to sleep when she did not hear anything further. Half an hour later, she smelled smoke. The fire seemed to start near the fuse box. George, Jenny, and 4 of the children, who had been sleeping downstairs, escaped the house. They yelled to the children upstairs, but heard no response. The fire had already been engulfing the staircase, so they could not rescue them. George tried to go outside, around the house, to use a ladder to climb the window to the attic and rescue the children. But the ladder was not in its usual place. It would be found 75 feet away in an embankment. Then, George tried to drive both his truck to the window, then climb them, but neither truck would start, despite having worked the previous day. Later, a telephone repairman told the Sodders that the house's phone line had not been burned in the fire, as they had initially thought, but cut by someone. The driver of a bus that passed through Fayetteville late Christmas Eve said he had seen some people throwing balls of fire at the house. Other witnesses claimed to have seen the children themselves. One woman, who had been watching the fire from the road, said she had seen some of them peering out of a passing car while the house was burning. Years later, in the 60s, Jeannie found in the mail a letter addressed to her, postmarked in Central City, Kentucky, with no return address. Inside was a picture of a young man, around 30, with features strongly resembling Lewis's, who would have been in his 30s if he had survived. On the back was written, Lewis Sodder, I love brother Frankie, Lil Boys, A90132, or 35. The Sodders never stopped believing their children were alive, and Jeannie wore black in mourning every day for the rest of her life. Number 4. Andrew Gosden. Smart boy who had a perfect attendance record skipped school to go to the train station to buy a one-way ticket to King's Cross in London on his own. As soon as he leaves the station, he seemingly vanishes in an area crawling with CCTV cameras. None of the CCTV cameras in the entirety of London had saved footage of him, as the police waited 2 weeks before asking local businesses if there was any footage of him saved, and there's no evidence of him ever leaving the city. There's theories he was groomed or got snatched off the street, but that's pretty much impossible to do in such a busy area. He had a PSP on him when he disappeared, but Sony confirmed no PSN account had ever been made on his account. He had no access to the internet at home and didn't even have a mobile phone. Strangely, he left the charger for the PSP at home, suggesting he possibly intended to come back. Number 5. The Bottom Lake Murders. In 1960 in Finland, a group of 4 teenagers went camping near Lake Bottom. 2 girls, both aged 15, and 2 guys, both aged 18. At night, the 3 of them were killed, and the only one of the boys survived. Their bodies and the horribly injured boy were found a few hours before noon. The badly injured boy was lying on top of the bloody tent. If you search for pictures of the tent, you can see that it's completely drenched in blood. The boy was not fully conscious and had several fractures in his skull. He survived and is still alive today, with no memory of what happened. The police tried everything to find out what happened. Later in 2005, the survivor was accused of being the murderer. I, however, do not believe this to be true. Some of the teen's possessions were taken, wallets, shoes, etc. Some were later found in the forest 500 meters away. With the injuries he had, walking that distance would have been impossible. Also, why come back to the crime scene? There was also no way this boy could have caused himself injuries to the back of the head. Also, some items, like the leather jacket from the boy that died, still haven't been found. To search for the murderer, the largest manhunt in Finland's history was conducted. 88 searched criminals were found in the forest of Espoo as a result, but not a murderer. There were multiple sightings of a light-haired man walking near the crime scene, before and after the crime. He was never found. Number 6. When I was 5, my dad didn't come to pick me up at the weekend as usual. My parents had been divorced for a few years, but were on relatively good terms and co-parenting by all accounts. The next day, my mom took me round because I was upset and she was pissed off. No answer at the door, but his car and work van were on the drive. She still had a key to the house, so let us in to find everything in place. His wallet and keys on the kitchen table, dog in his bed. She fed the dog and went back home. After a couple of days, still no contact, so she went back round. Everything was just as she found it last, all belongings enclosed there, his bags and suitcase still in the cupboard, just a hungry dog. She took the dog back with her and spoke to his side of the family. No one had heard from him for about a week, but nothing out of the ordinary. A mutual friend at his work said he hadn't been in for a week either, and their boss was furious. She called the police and reported him missing. They found no clues. His wallet, keys, and cars all at the house. His passport was in the drawer. His petty cash stash of about £500 was where it was always kept. No signs of struggle, no signs of his bank accounts hadn't been touched for a week, and no out of the ordinary or large transactions, or withdrawals over the previous months. Long story short, they found nothing, and eventually shelved the case, and 23 years later, still no contact with any friends or family. His parents and brother have all since passed away, never knowing what happened. Number 7. Amy Bradley. She was on a cruise with her family when she went missing. They only have suppositions on when exactly she disappeared, but it was on the ship, since the last sight of her was when the ship was en route to the Antilles. One of the theories is that she was sold to sexual slavery, but the details of her disappearance are really creepy. The fact that she was taken in an enclosed space and nobody saw or found anything is baffling. Also, the ship's crew were quite uncooperative, first with the family and then the FBI, leading some people to think they had a kind of deal with a sex ring. Amy had told to her parents the night prior to her disappearance that she was creeped out by some cruise members, who were insistent for her to go on shore with them in Curacao. I'm not sure about that, but the fact is, her case is really sad. Some tourists have claimed to have seen her on the shore months later, malnourished and terrified, with 2 men next to her. As of right now, it's been 21 years, and she's still missing.